I think it's safe to say that Tyrion Lannister is one of the most beloved characters on the entire show, and for good reason, to be fair. Peter Dinklage gives a flawless performance for the entirety of the show's run, and his clapbacks at Joffrey in the early seasons are brilliant and classic moments that definitely helped him be so loved by the fandom. However, despite Tyrion's many assertions that he's actually really smart and was a good hand of the king to Joffrey when he held that post, I actually argue that he was a terrible hand of the queen to Daenerys and was one of the main reasons why she lost the war. Now, to be fair, in season 5 and 6, I think he does give her some decent advice. Like his manner of trying to negotiate with the Masters in season 6 is actually pretty smart and logical, even if it totally backfires in his face. And moments like this scene from season 5 after he's just met Daenerys, he's giving us some honest and sound and logical advice.
When you get back to your home, who supports you?
The common people.
Let's be generous and assume that's going to happen. Here in Slaver's Bay, you had the support of the common people, and only the common people. What was that like? Ruling without the rich?
And even some of his advice in season 7 especially, where he tries to curb some of Dany's more aggressive or drastic impulses, like when she burns the Tarleys and he tries to talk her out of that, and then even later on he tries to counsel her against such actions again. These are smart pieces of advice, even if sometimes they fail or completely backfire on him. You can see the logic behind these decisions. But the piece of advice that bothers me the most, and the main reason why I think Tyrion was a really bad hand of the queen, is his assertion that Daenerys not use the dragons, and that especially in season 7, he doesn't want her to take them straight to King's Landing to the Red Keep.
If Viserys had 3 dragons and an army at his back, he'd have invaded King's Landing already.
Conquering Westeros would be easy for you, but you're not here to be Queen of the Ashes.
No.
So this is the first time Tyrion uses the Queen of the Ashes argument, the first of many times in season 7 and 8. And you can understand why he doesn't want to take the full force of 3 full-grown dragons and unleash that on the capital. But Dany does acknowledge that she could have already invaded King's Landing and thus potentially have won already. But she obviously recognises that this is what her brother Viserys would have done. And since he wasn't exactly the best guy around, you can understand why she wanted to try it Tyrion's way first. However, 2 episodes later, when they've lost all their allies and Cersei and Jaime have clearly outsmarted them in the field of battle, he still refuses to use their biggest advantage, the dragons.
Enough with the clever plans. I have 3 large dragons. I'm going to fly them to the Red Keep.
We've discussed this.
My enemies are in the Red Keep. What kind of a queen am I if I'm not willing to risk my life to fight them?
A smart one.
See, even now, his plans have failed miserably, yet he's still reluctant to use the dragons, when at this point he should realise, yes, we can scare Cersei and force her surrender if we take 3 full-grown dragons to the Red Keep. See, we know by season 7 Dany can somehow control the dragons, so there's no reason for Tyrion to think that they will run wild and burn everything down to the ground without Dany's permission. I mean, he should have realised this in the council scene in episode 2 when they've just arrived in Westeros, that he should use this element of surprise against Cersei immediately and take the dragons to King's Landing. But for some reason, he tries to outwit Cersei at the Game of Thrones and devises these clever, intricate plots instead. But by not doing this straight away, it gives Cersei and Qyburn the time to adapt to the dragon threat, which they do. They build an army of scorpions to attack them. Now, obviously, Tyrion's main argument against using the dragons and why he's so reluctant to is that he doesn't want Daenerys to burn King's Landing to the ground. But like I said before, we know by this point Daenerys has learned to control the dragons somehow. But also, more importantly, Tyrion should realise that if Daenerys doesn't get what she wants, King's Landing, and Westeros by this point, that she will do something drastic if she keeps being beaten, which it's worth noting, though, that Yara and Ilaria give Daenerys this exact advice to go straight to King's Landing, and she doesn't take it. She instead listens to Tyrion's more moral advice.
Hit King's Landing now, hard, with everything we have. The city will fall within a day.
If we turn the dragons loose, tens of thousands will die in the firestorms.
It's called war.
I don't know if this is Tyrion's idea of trying to play the game fair, as it were. Like, his desire to seemingly keep the dragons out of the equation at all just seems odd, and it just seems like really bad advice to give when the dragons are their best advantage over Cersei. A similar situation occurs in Fire and Blood, the Game of Thrones prequel based on the Targaryen dynasty. King Jaehaerys prevented a war with Prince Morian Martell of Dawn. He defeated him in a single day without losing a single man on his side because he took his dragons and destroyed the Dornish fleet before they could even set sail. So why doesn't Tyrion suggest a similar strategy? But not only does he not suggest this kind of strategy, he actively discourages it time and time again, as I've just been saying. I actually feel like you can compare Daenerys' desire to use the dragons straight away and end the war quickly to Tywin's decision to slaughter the Starks at the Red Wedding. In defense of this action, Tywin says this:
Do you disapprove?
I'm all for cheating. This is war. But to slaughter them at a wedding...
Explain to me why it is more noble to kill 10,000 men in battle than a dozen at dinner.
So that's why you did it? To save lives?
To end the war, to protect the family.
However, Tyrion's advice to Daenerys in Season 7 would seem to imply that he disagrees with Tywin here, in the same way that the Red Wedding ended the war quickly and killed a dozen men at dinner rather than 10,000 in battle. The dragons would kill, yes, the people in the Red Keep most likely, but would save thousands in the field. It's also worth noting here that Tyrion says, I'm all for cheating, this is war. Yet he apparently isn't all for cheating when it comes to Daenerys, because if he was, he would just use the dragons to their full advantage. So the main reason why I think Tyrion was a bad hand of the Queen to Daenerys is his complete reluctance to use the dragons over and over again. And I can only imagine that there are several reasons behind this. Either he's trying to beat Cersei on a personal level at her own game and thus has to have an even battlefield because he wants to prove that he's smarter than she is. Or he actually thinks it's the right thing to do to keep the dragons out of the war. Or he just thinks his plan is right, in which case he's just kind of dumb. So I probably repeated myself quite a bit during this video and it might have gone a bit rambly, so for that I do apologise. But I think the main point I want to press is that Tyrion's advice about not using the dragons is just bizarre. Obviously I get that for the sake of like the show, like the plot would have been a lot shorter and a lot less eventful had they just had Daenerys take King's Landing straight away. But I think like Tyrion of all people being the voice of opposition against using 3 dragons in war was a bit of an odd choice.